Get your black ass off my courthouse steps. Officer Brennan's boot came down hard, crushing Franklin Oliver's papers into the concrete. Legal documents, a keynote speech, 30 years of credentials, all treated like garbage. Franklin sat frozen. 72 years old, hands cuffed behind his back, blood soaking through his slacks where Brennan had shoved him to the ground. I said move, old man. Brennan kicked his briefcase down the steps. You too stupid to understand? Officer, I'm speaking at the Police Reform Summit. Brennan laughed, cold and cutting. Sure you are. You people always have some story about why you're trespassing where you don't belong. You people, where you don't belong. Because to Brennan, Franklin was just another elderly black man loitering on his courthouse steps. Another problem to remove. He had no idea he'd just arrested the former Chief Justice of North Carolina. The man who could destroy his career with one phone call. 7:45 in the morning. 15 minutes before the courthouse opened. Franklin had arrived early like he always did. Punctuality was a habit formed over 4 decades in courtrooms. Now his briefcase lay open at the bottom of the steps, papers scattered across concrete. One page tumbled toward the parking lot, stamped in red. Confidential. Office of the Governor. Brennan didn't notice, too busy yanking Franklin to his feet. Officer Hayes stood nearby, younger, uncertain. His eyes darted between Franklin's calm face and the scattered credentials. Brad, maybe we should verify... Verify what? Brennan snapped. That he's got a good cover story? These guys practice this. They sound educated. Stay calm. It's all part of the con. Franklin said nothing. Arguing with someone convinced of your guilt only gave them ammunition. Let them talk. Let them reveal themselves. His knee throbbed where it had hit the curb. Blood pooled in his sock now. At 72, even minor injuries took time to heal. These are the black stories that get buried under procedural language. Subject was non-compliant. Officer felt threatened. Words that sanitize violence. Words that turn humans into statistics. Sarah Bennett hurried up the walkway. Junior prosecutor, gray suit, coffee in one hand, phone in the other, running late. She glanced up, saw Franklin on the ground, blood visible, Brennan standing over him with that particular cop stance. Their eyes met. She saw what this was. Another elderly person treated like a criminal. Another morning in America. She looked away, walked faster, disappeared through the brass doors. This is how injustice persists, not through active cruelty alone, but through accumulated silence. People who see and choose not to look, who witness and choose convenience over courage. Gregory Hayes watched from inside the security checkpoint. 23 years on the job. He recognized Franklin's face immediately despite the gray beard and weight loss. His hand moved toward the door. He could stop this, could tell Brennan who he was manhandling. But Gregory had twin daughters in college, tuition bills that didn't pause for righteousness. He'd seen security guards fired for interfering with police operations, so he pulled out his phone instead. Started recording through the glass. Helen Dobson pushed her maintenance cart around the corner just as Brennan kicked Franklin's briefcase. The leather case tumbled down the steps, brass clasps breaking, papers exploding outward. "Wait!" Helen called out. 31 years of maintenance work meant she knew every face in this courthouse, including Franklin Oliver's. "Officer, stop! That's not—" "Ma'am, step back." Brennan moved to block her, hand near his weapon. "This is official police business." "But he's justice." "Final warning." Helen stumbled backward, nearly dropping her supplies. Her hands shook as she grabbed her phone. She picked up one of Franklin's papers, saw his photo, saw the title, Chief Justice, North Carolina Supreme Court. Tears filled her eyes. This was wrong. But Brennan's hand was near his weapon and she was 65, and her granddaughter needed picking up at 3 o'clock. She dialed 911 with trembling fingers. Brennan's hand gripped Franklin's shoulder again. Rougher. Less patience. Time to move. Time to be processed. Time to become another number. They walked toward the patrol car. Each step sent pain up Franklin's injured leg, but he kept his face neutral, dignified. He'd learned that from his father. Birmingham, 1969. Franklin was 5 years old. He watched through a diner window as white police officers cuffed his father for causing a disturbance. His crime? Asking for water at the whites-only counter. Young Franklin had pressed his hands against the glass. Powerless. His father looked back and mouthed 3 words. "Be better, son." So Franklin spent 56 years being better, studying harder, working longer, climbing higher. He became a lawyer, a judge, chief justice. And yet here he was, hands cuffed, blood in his shoes, being arrested on the steps where he'd dispensed justice for 30 years. Time moved in circles after all. "Watch your head." Brennan's hand came down on Franklin's head, not gently, the classic perp move, forcing him to duck into the caged back seat. Franklin's glasses slipped from his face, clattered on pavement. Hayes bent down without being asked, picked them up, handed them through the window. Their eyes met. Hayes looked away first. Small mercies. Inside the patrol car, Franklin smelled everything. Stale coffee. Vinyl seats baking in heat. Sweat and fear, the scent of everyone who'd sat here before. The radio crackled. "All units be advised. Summit event at Courthouse. Governor's office requesting security. Event starts at 900 hours. Franklin closed his eyes. That was his event, his speech, his moment to announce real reform. Brennan turned down the volume. Not our problem. But it was his problem. He just didn't know it yet. A crowd formed on the plaza. Morning joggers stopping, commuters slowing. Everyone with phones out, cameras recording. A young black woman's voice. "They're arresting a grandpa for sitting? This is sick." What did he even do? Nothing. I saw the whole thing. Brennan noticed the cameras. "Everyone step back, disperse, or you'll be charged with obstruction." Nobody moved. They'd seen this before. Watched this story in their own neighborhoods. And they were tired of watching it end the same way. So they kept filming, kept bearing witness. Franklin watched through the partition as the car pulled away. Watched Gregory frozen at the door. Watched Helen gathering his papers. Watched the brass doors close. Watched his courthouse disappear while steel pressed cold against his wrists and blood soaked warm through his socks. He'd built his career believing the law was blind to race, that justice would prevail, that the system would bend toward righteousness. Officer Brennan had just shown him how wrong he'd been. But Franklin Oliver had spent 30 years learning patience, learning strategy, learning that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is let your opponents reveal themselves completely. So he stayed quiet, stayed calm, and waited for the moment when everyone would realize exactly who they'd put in handcuffs. The precinct smelled like burnt coffee and industrial cleaner. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead. 8:15 in the morning. The desk sergeant looked up from his computer. Name tag, Miller, 43 years old. Night shift ending. Eyes red from 12 hours of processing drunk drivers and domestic disputes. Name? Miller's fingers hovered over the keyboard. Franklin Thurgood Oliver. Miller smirked. Thurgood? Like the Supreme Court guy? My mother admired him. Franklin's voice stayed level, calm, the tone he'd perfected over 30 years on the bench. Never raise your voice, never give them ammunition. Address? Franklin gave his street. Upscale neighborhood, oak trees, historic homes, the kind of address that usually changed conversations. Miller's smirk widened. You homeless or not? Pick a story. I've lived there 32 years. Convenient, Miller typed slowly, skeptical of every word. Empty your pockets. Wallet. Brown leather, worn at the edges. Driver's license expired by 6 months. Franklin didn't drive much anymore. Credit cards, black card. Miller barely glanced at it, probably thought it was fake. Courthouse ID badge, photo from 2019. Franklin with full beard and 25 pounds more weight. The badge was faded, lamination peeling at the corners. Miller held it up to the light. This doesn't look like you. People age, Sergeant. This expired a year ago. I'm retired. They don't issue new IDs to retirees. Miller tossed it into an evidence bag. We'll verify it. Sit down. Franklin sat on the metal bench, cold through his torn slacks. His knee was still bleeding. Not much, just enough to remind him it was there. He pulled a handkerchief from his pocket, monogrammed, FTO. Sarah had given it to him in 1985, the day he was confirmed to Superior Court. He dabbed at the cut through the fabric. The blood had already dried. Sticky, dark. Young Officer Katie Russo walked past with coffee. 25 years old, blonde ponytail. She glanced at Franklin. Did a double take, stopped, stared at the evidence bag on Miller's desk. Sarge, can I see that ID? Miller waved her off. Handle your own desk, Russo. But Russo was already pulling out her phone, typing, searching. Her eyes widened. She looked at Franklin, back at her phone, back at Franklin. Sarge, not now, Russo. She hesitated, then walked to her desk, kept her phone out, kept searching. Brennan and Hayes stood in the hallway. Through the glass partition, Franklin could see them talking. Brennan's arms crossed, defensive posture. Hayes shaking his head, disagreement brewing. Brad, we need to check his story. Hayes kept his voice low but urgent. His story? He's a vagrant with a briefcase full of random papers. Random papers that say he's a retired judge. Anybody can print that stuff. You know how many fake IDs we see? The photo matches. Older, but it's him. Brennan's jaw tightened. You going soft on me? Hayes stepped back. I'm saying we should verify before this goes further. It's already processed. Too late to second guess now. These are the real-life stories that shape the justice system, not dramatic courtroom battles, quiet moments in precinct hallways, choices made in anger or pride or fear, choices that can't be undone. Captain Diane Torres arrived at 8:30, 45 years old, 20 years on the force, strong record, few complaints. She scanned the booking log on her tablet, stopped at Franklin's name. Loitering? At the courthouse? Brennan intercepted her. Morning, Cap. Got a suspicious person. Refused to comply. Had fake credentials. Torres looked at the evidence bag, picked up the ID, studied it. This doesn't look fake. Photo doesn't match. Could be stolen. Torres rubbed her temples. She'd been doing this too long to miss the warning signs. Brennan, how many complaints are you up to this month? Those were all. I asked how many. Brennan's face flushed. 3. All involving people of color. That's not. Torres held up her hand. Process him and release on citation. We have the summit starting soon. The building's going to be crawling with dignitaries. I don't need complications. Cap, I think there's more here. Give me 20 minutes to question him. Torres checked her watch. Calculated. Sighed. 15 minutes. Then I want him released or formally charged. Understood? Brennan nodded. Grabbed the file. Headed for the interrogation room. Franklin was escorted down a gray hallway. Cinder block walls, scuffed linoleum, fluorescent lights casting everything in harsh white. The interrogation room was small. Metal table bolted to the floor. 2 chairs. Camera in the corner. Red light blinking. Brennan sat across from him. Hayes stood by the door, clipboard in hand, recording everything. "Okay, Mr. Oliver." Brennan leaned back, trying to project authority, control. "Let's try this again. What were you really doing at that courthouse?" "I told you I'm speaking at the Police Accountability Summit at 9 o'clock. "Right. And who invited you to this summit?" "Governor Mitchell Harrison's office." Brennan laughed. Short, sharp. "Of course. And you know the governor personally, I'm guessing?" 23 years. Franklin's tone didn't change, still calm, still measured. "We served together on the state appeals court from 2002 to 2004, before he entered politics." The specificity made Brennan pause. Most people lying kept details vague. This was exact, verifiable. "Hayes, check that." Hayes pulled out his phone, typed, scrolled. His face went pale. "Brad, Governor Harrison was on state appeals court, 2002 to 2004, with a Judge Franklin Oliver." Brennan's confidence wavered, just slightly. "Lots of people named Franklin Oliver." "Sir." Hayes's voice was quiet, careful. "I'm looking at a photo right now. It's him." Franklin watched Brennan's face, watched the moment doubt crept in, watched the defensive wall go up, pride refusing to admit error. "So you Googled the real judge's name?" Brennan's voice rose slightly. "That's what con men do. They research, they prepare convincing stories." "Officer Brennan." Franklin folded his hands on the table. The handcuffs were off now. Small mercy. "Badge number 2834. You graduated from the police academy in November 2022, third in your class. Assigned to 4th Precinct initially, transferred here after 6 months. Brennan froze. "How do you—" "I may be retired, but I still review the state's justice reports, including police academy records. I wrote a recommendation letter supporting funding for your graduating class." The room went silent. Hayes backed toward the door. "Brad, we need to stop this, right now." Brennan stood abruptly. Chair scraped against linoleum. "No. This is exactly what they do. They dig up public information. Make it sound personal. It's manipulation." The door burst open. Captain Torres stood in the frame, phone in hand, face drained of color. "Brennan, out. Now." "Captain, I'm in the middle of—" "I just got a call from the governor's chief of staff." Her voice shook. Anger barely controlled. "They're asking where Justice Oliver is. The summit starts in 30 minutes. The keynote speaker is missing." The silence that followed was absolute. Torres approached Franklin. Professional mask cracking. "Justice Oliver, sir. I apologize. We didn't realize—" Franklin stood slowly, brushed off his slacks, blood still visible on the torn fabric. "No, Captain, you didn't ask." His words landed like stones in water, ripples spreading. "Your security detail called. Agent Reynolds is en route." "I don't have a security detail, Captain. I'm retired." "The governor assigned one this morning, for the summit." Franklin nodded. Mitchell was protective. Always had been, even when they disagreed. Torres unlocked the interrogation room door fully. "Sir, is there anything—" "I need the surveillance footage. All of it. From the courthouse steps to this room." Torres nodded, hands trembling as she made notes. "And Officer Brennan's personnel file, including complaint history." Brennan's face went white. Torres disappeared into her office, returned 2 minutes later with a file folder, handed it to Franklin. He opened it, scanned the pages, expression darkening with each line. 15 citizen complaints in 2 years. Franklin's voice stayed level, but something in it had changed, hardened. 14 involving people of color, all investigated internally, all dismissed. "Those were cleared by—" Brennan started. by your fellow officers. Franklin closed the file. That's the problem, isn't it? The system investigating itself. Katie Russo appeared in the hallway, tablet in hand. Justice Oliver. Sir, the arrest was filmed. It's already online. She showed him the screen. Video playing. 60,000 views. Comments section scrolling. Outrage building. Justice for Justice Oliver trending. Franklin studied the video, watched himself stumble, watched the papers scatter, watched Brennan's boot push them aside. Good, he said quietly. Let people see. The precinct had gone silent. Every officer watching. Russo's Google search displayed on every computer screen. Photos of Franklin in Supreme Court robes, articles about landmark cases, his retirement ceremony with Governor Harrison, the truth spreading like wildfire. Torres cleared her throat. Sir, I want you to know we'll conduct a full investigation. Captain Torres. Franklin's eyes met hers. I want Officer Brennan at the summit. Front row. Brennan jerked. What? You're going to hear every word of my speech, and then we're going to talk about reform, starting with you. Torres opened her mouth, closed it. Sir, I can assign another officer if... No, him. He needs to understand what his assumptions cost. A black SUV pulled up outside. Government plates. Agent Thomas Reynolds stepped out. 56 years old, former Secret Service, Governor's personal security chief. He entered the precinct with purpose, badge already out. I'm here for Justice Franklin Oliver. His voice carried authority that made every officer straighten. Where is he? The desk sergeant pointed mutely toward the hallway. Reynolds walked through, saw Franklin, saw the torn slacks, the blood, the crumpled papers in the evidence bag. His jaw tightened. Justice Oliver, sir. He stopped, struggling with protocol and anger. We've been looking everywhere. Are you... I'm fine, Thomas. Franklin picked up his briefcase, papers still scattered inside. Just delayed. Reynolds turned to Torres. Who arrested him? Brennan stepped forward, couldn't help himself, habit of defending his actions. I did. He was loitering. Did you verify his identification? It looked fake. The photo didn't match. Because people age, officer. Reynolds' tone could cut glass. Let's go, sir. The governor is waiting. Not yet. Franklin's voice stopped everyone. I have one more thing to do. He turned to Brennan, looked at him directly. Really looked. Saw a young man, scared now. Scared. Defensive. Trained to see threats. Never taught to see humans. Officer Brennan, you're coming with us. That's not a request. Torres nodded. Brennan, you're assigned to Summit Security Detail. Go! Brennan looked at Hayes, desperate. Hayes just shook his head. No help coming. The three of them walked out together, Franklin in the middle, Reynolds on one side, Brennan on the other, like some strange escort, some twisted parade. The morning sun was bright, harsh, unforgiving. Franklin squinted. His knee still hurt. His wrists were raw where the cuffs had bitten. His slacks were ruined. But he was walking back to that courthouse, and he was bringing his arresting officer with him. Sometimes justice isn't about punishment. It's about education. About forcing people to witness the consequences of their assumptions. Brennan sat in the passenger seat. Reynolds drove. Franklin in back. The silence was suffocating. Franklin watched the city pass. The coffee shop where he met old colleagues. The park where he walked his granddaughter. The library where he'd researched his first case. His city. His home. Where he'd worked for 42 years. And this morning, he'd been treated like trash on its courthouse steps. He pulled out his handkerchief. The monogrammed FTO. Thought about Sarah. what she would say, how she would react. She died in 2018. Pneumonia. Sudden. Devastating. Her last words, "Keep fighting, Frank. Don't let them win." He wouldn't, but he'd fight differently than she might expect. Not with anger, with accountability. The courthouse appeared ahead. Limestone facade. Brass doors gleaming. Franklin had walked through those doors 10,000 times, as a young attorney, as a judge, as Chief Justice. Today, he'd been dragged away from them in handcuffs. Brennan stared straight ahead, jaw clenched, hands gripping his knees. His breathing was shallow, quick, panic barely controlled. Reynolds glanced in the rearview mirror. "Sir, we're 15 minutes behind schedule. The governor is concerned." "Mitchell knows I'm never late without reason." Franklin's voice was quiet. "He'll wait." They pulled into the courthouse parking lot. Media vans everywhere. Cameras, reporters. News of the arrest had spread. Someone had leaked it. Probably one of the officers. Or maybe one of the bystanders. The story was out. Reynolds parked near the back entrance, tried to shield Franklin from the cameras, but Franklin stopped him. "No, front entrance." "Sir, the media—" "Let them see." They walked together, Franklin in torn slacks and wrinkled shirt, blood stain visible, Brennan in his uniform, clean, pressed, the contrast stark. Cameras erupted, flashbulbs, questions shouted. "Justice Oliver, is it true you were arrested?" "Officer, why did you arrest him?" "Justice Oliver, will you sue the department?" Franklin kept walking, steady pace, head high, dignified despite everything. He'd learned long ago that dignity isn't about appearance. It's about choice, how you carry yourself when the world tries to break you. Gregory Hayes stood at the entrance. Security checkpoint. He saw Franklin coming. Their eyes met. Gregory's face crumbled, shame written across it. "Sir, I'm sorry. I should have—" Franklin stopped, put a hand on Gregory's shoulder. "You tried. That's more than most." "I was afraid. Fear is human, but we can't let it govern us." He handed Gregory a card. White, embossed. "I'm forming a community advisory board. Will you serve?" Gregory took the card, nodded, couldn't speak. Inside, the courthouse was chaos. Victoria Moore, the summit coordinator, rushed toward them, tablet clutched to her chest, stress radiating from every movement. "Justice Oliver, thank God, we've been calling—" "I was detained, Victoria." She looked at his torn slacks. The blood. "Should we delay?" "You need medical—" "No delays." "Oh, I'll speak as scheduled." Governor Mitchell Harrison emerged from a side office. 65 years old, silver hair, pressed suit. But his face showed anger barely contained, not at Franklin, at what happened. "Frank." He gripped Franklin's arms, checked him over. "Jesus Christ, are you okay?" Franklin nodded, gestured to his knee. "I've had worse. This is unacceptable. I'm calling for immediate—" "You already did, by inviting me to speak." Mitchell understood. He'd known Franklin for 26 years, knew how his mind worked, saw the plan forming. "What do you need from me?" Franklin pulled his crumpled speech notes from his briefcase, pages torn, some stained with blood. 10 minutes to rewrite this." "We can push the start." "No. They've waited long enough." Mitchell led him to a private chamber, judge's quarters, empty now. Franklin sat at the desk, pulled out a pen, started crossing out paragraphs, adding new sections. The words flowed, fueled by the morning's experience, by 56 years of memories, by every case he'd seen, every person who'd been judged by appearance instead of evidence. Mitchell read over his shoulder, nodded slowly. "This is going to shake people." "Good. They need shaking." Helen Dobson knocked, entered with a first aid kit. "Justice Oliver, your knee. Can I—" Franklin let her clean the wound, bandage it. She worked in silence, tears running down her face. "I tried to tell them," she whispered. "I'm so sorry." "Helen, you did tell them. They chose not to listen. That's not on you. I watched you work here for 20 years. You helped my nephew once. Pro bono case. Wrongful termination. 2014. You probably don't remember. Antonio, construction company. He won. 6 months back pay." Helen gasped. "You remember?" "I remember everyone." Through the chamber window, Franklin could see Brennan, sitting on a bench in the hallway, head in his hands, shoulders shaking. Hayes stood nearby, hand on Brennan's shoulder, talking quietly. Franklin paused, pen hovering over paper. He could destroy this young man. One speech, name him publicly, end his career. The anger was there, the boot on his leg, the mocking tone. "Pick up your trash, old man." The humiliation. The anger was real and justified. But Sarah's voice echoed from years ago, from their last conversation. "Anger is easy, Frank. Change is hard. Which one are you choosing?" Franklin set down his pen, walked to the door, opened it. "Officer Brennan, come in." Brennan looked up, eyes red, face blotchy. He stood, walked into the chamber like a man approaching execution. "Sit." Brennan sat. Couldn't meet Franklin's eyes. "I'm about to give a speech that will likely end your career." Franklin's tone was conversational, matter of fact. "Unless—" Brennan looked up, desperate. "Unless you're willing to become part of the solution instead of an example of the problem." Silence. "I'm proposing a statewide training program. Real scenarios, real accountability, real change. You'll be the first officer to complete it. 3 months. Intensive. Every Saturday for a year, you'll sit on those courthouse steps and listen to community members share their experiences with policing." Brennan's mouth opened, closed. "Why would you, after what I did?" "Because ending you doesn't end the system that created you. Changing you might. These are the touching stories that define character. Not the grand gestures, the small choices. The moment you decide whether to destroy or rebuild. Do you accept?" Brennan swallowed hard. "I don't deserve this chance." "No, you don't. But change isn't about desert. It's about decision. So decide." Brennan wiped his eyes. "Yes, sir, I accept." Franklin extended his hand. Brennan stared at it. The hand he'd cuffed, the hand he'd dismissed, now offering him redemption. He took it. They shook. Mitchell watched from the doorway, said nothing, just nodded. Franklin returned to his desk, finished rewriting the speech. The words came faster now, clearer, sharper. He wasn't writing from theory anymore. He was writing from experience, fresh, raw, real. At 9:28, he stood, picked up his briefcase, looked at Mitchell. "Ready? The question is whether they're ready for you." Franklin smiled, small, tired. "They'll never be ready, but that's not the point. The point is they need to hear it anyway." They walked toward the auditorium. Franklin, Mitchell, Brennan following 3 steps behind, like some strange procession, some ritual of accountability. The auditorium doors loomed ahead. Behind them, 300 people waited. Police chiefs, officers, community leaders, press, all waiting to hear about police reform, about accountability, about change. None of them knew they were about to witness it in real time. Franklin paused at the door, looked down at his torn slacks, his bandaged knee, his wrinkled shirt. Good. Let them see. Let them understand that dignity doesn't come from appearance, it comes from truth. He pushed open the door. The lights hit him. The audience turned. And Franklin Oliver walked onto that stage carrying the weight of 56 years, carrying the morning's humiliation, carrying his father's memory from Birmingham, carrying every person who'd ever been judged by their skin before their character. He walked onto that stage to change the system, one speech at a time. The auditorium fell silent as Franklin approached the podium. 300 faces turning, noticing his condition, the torn slacks, the visible bandage, the wrinkled shirt, whispers spreading like ripples. Victoria Moore stood at the microphone, tried to smile. Ladies and gentlemen, despite this morning's difficulties, please welcome our keynote speaker, former Chief Justice of the North Carolina Supreme Court, Franklin Thurgood Oliver. Polite applause, confused, uncertain. Franklin set his briefcase on the podium, opened it, the torn papers inside, his ruined speech notes. He didn't take them out, just looked at them, then at the audience. Let the silence build. Let them wait. Let them wonder. Finally, thank you for that introduction, though I should clarify, I almost didn't make it here this morning. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Not due to traffic, not due to illness, but because at 7:45 this morning, I was arrested. On the steps of this very building. The auditorium erupted. Gasps, shocked voices, reporters already typing. Franklin raised his hand. Silence fell. By Officer Brad Brennan of the City Police Department, for loitering. He gestured to Brennan, sitting front row. Every camera swiveled. Brennan sank in his seat, wanted to disappear. Franklin described the arrest, factual, no embellishment needed, the boot on his leg, the papers scattered, the mocking tone. Pick up your trash, old man. Lay. The holding cell. The obviously fake credentials. Each word landed with precision, with weight. The audience sat transfixed. Now, Officer Brennan isn't here as a defendant today. He's here as a case study. Franklin pulled up Brennan's file on the screen behind him. Redacted, but enough visible. 15 complaints in 2 years. 14 involving people of color. All investigated internally, all dismissed. The screen changed. Statistics appeared. Clean graphs, hard data. But here's the question we need to ask. Is Officer Brennan uniquely bad? Or is he a product of a system that trains officers to see threat before humanity? The audience shifted. Uncomfortable. Some officers crossed their arms. Others leaned forward. This morning's arrest was filmed. It's currently viral. Over 200,000 views and climbing. The screen showed the video. Franklin sitting on courthouse steps. Brennan approaching. The boot. The papers scattering. The cuffs. The forced crouch into the patrol car. The audience watched in silence. Even those who'd seen it before. Watching it here, in this context, made it different. More real. I'm a former Chief Justice. I had resources, a governor to call, a platform to speak from. I got out in 90 minutes. Franklin paused. Let that sink in. How many people sit in that same cell without my credentials, without my connections, without my title, and what happens to them? The silence was absolute. Let me share some statistics from our own state justice system. New graphs appeared. Professional, sourced, undeniable. Black Americans are 3 times more likely to be stopped for suspicious behavior than white Americans. 66% of such stops result in no charges filed. Average processing time for black suspects is 48% longer than for white suspects with identical alleged offenses. Franklin looked directly at the police chiefs in the front rows. Chiefs, be honest. Chiefs. B. How many of you review complaint patterns by individual officer? By precinct? By race of complainant? Uncomfortable shifting. A few hands raised. Very few. How many of you have mandatory implicit bias training that goes beyond a single PowerPoint presentation and a checkbox? Even fewer hands. Exactly. We've treated systemic racism as a PR problem. It's a justice problem. The screen changed again. Photos appeared, faces blurred for privacy, but the story's visible. 3 months ago, a black teenager, honor student, no criminal record, arrested for loitering outside a coffee shop. He was waiting for his tutor, spent 6 hours in custody, no charges, no apology. Next photo. 5 months ago, a black woman, night shift nurse, stopped for suspicious behavior in her own neighborhood because she was walking home at 2 a.m. in scrubs. Next photo. 7 months ago, a black father, pulled over for matching a description, his 5-year-old daughter in the back seat, watching her father handcuffed on the roadside for 20 minutes until someone realized they had the wrong car. Franklin's voice remained calm, level, but something in it had changed, hardened. None of them can stand here. None of them have my platform. But they have the same dignity I have, the same rights, the same humanity, and they deserve better than what we're giving them. Governor Harrison walked onto the stage, document folder in hand, the movement perfectly timed, rehearsed during those 10 minutes in the chamber. Justice Oliver, may I? Franklin nodded, stepped aside. This morning, at 8:45, I signed Executive Order 2856. Mitchell held up the document. Official seal visible. The Police Accountability and Reform Initiative, effective immediately. The screen displayed the order's key points. Mandatory body cameras within 90 days. Quarterly scenario-based bias training. Civilian oversight boards in every county. Public complaint databases. Third-party investigation of all officer complaints. Non-negotiable, Mitchell added. His voice carried the weight of executive authority. This isn't optional. This isn't a pilot program. This is law. A police union representative stood, older, white, skeptical. Governor, with respect, this will hamstring our officers' ability to do what? Mitchell cut him off. To operate without accountability? If your job requires unchecked power, then you're in the wrong job. The representative sat down, silent, angry. Franklin returned to the podium. I know what some of you are thinking. This is one bad incident, one bad apple. We're not all like that. He paused, scanned the audience. You're right. You're not. But silence in the face of patterns makes you complicit. He pointed to the officers scattered throughout the auditorium. How many of you have witnessed a colleague use excessive force, racial profiling, make questionable stops based on appearance rather than behavior? Hands rose slowly. Maybe 30% of the officers, reluctant, guilty. Now, how many of you reported it? Every hand dropped, except 3. Out of 300 people. The silence that followed was devastating. That's the real problem. Not the few who abuse power, the many who let them. The system that protects bad actors because speaking up is seen as disloyalty instead of duty. Franklin gestured to Brennan. Which brings me back to Officer Brennan. Come up here. Brennan stood, legs unsteady, every eye on him. He walked to the stage like a man walking to the gallows. The spotlight found him. Harsh, unforgiving. Franklin faced him directly. Officer Brennan, you have 2 choices today. The audience leaned forward, anticipating punishment, public shaming, career destruction. Option 1, resign, face federal investigation, become a cautionary tale, a news story, a statistic. Brennan nodded, tears starting, accepting his fate. Option 2. Franklin paused. Let the moment stretch. I don't want your resignation, officer. I want your transformation. The audience gasped, confused, uncertain where this was going. Officer Brennan will become the first participant in our new statewide training program. 3 months. Intensive. He'll learn the history he wasn't taught in academy, the psychology of bias, the legal frameworks, the human cost of assumptions. Murmurs spread, some approving, many skeptical. And every Saturday for 1 year, he'll sit on those courthouse steps, the same steps where he arrested me, and listen to community members, to their stories about policing, about their experiences, their fears, their trauma. Franklin extended his hand to Brennan. Do you accept? Brennan stared at the hand he'd cuffed, the hand he'd dismissed as belonging to a vagrant, now offering him redemption instead of destruction. Brennan's voice cracked. I don't deserve this chance. But yes. Yes, sir. They shook hands. The cameras went wild, flash after flash, the image that would define the story, former Chief Justice and his arresting officer, shaking hands on stage, choosing transformation over vengeance. The applause started slowly. Community leaders first, then some officers, then more, building to a standing ovation. Not everyone stood. Some officers remained seated, arms crossed, skeptical, angry. But enough stood, enough to signal change. Franklin waited for silence. This isn't mercy. This is accountability. Real accountability. Officer Brennan will be monitored, evaluated. If he fails this program, the consequences will be severe. But if he succeeds, he'll train other officers. He'll be living proof that change is possible. He turned back to the audience. That's what we're building here. Not a system of punishment, a system of growth, of learning, of actual reform instead of empty promises and performative gestures. The reporters were already filing stories, headlines forming. Judge offers redemption to officer who arrested him. Transformative justice in action. North Carolina's bold police reform initiative. But Franklin wasn't done. Now, let's talk implementation. Because executive orders are meaningless without enforcement, without resources, without commitment. For the next 20 minutes, he walked through the specifics. Budget allocations, training timelines, oversight mechanisms. He'd spent 5 years preparing this, working with Mitchell, building the framework, waiting for the political will to implement it. This morning's arrest provided that will, gave them the leverage they needed. Sometimes injustice serves justice, by forcing the conversation, by making the invisible visible. At 10:45, Franklin concluded, this initiative will fail without community involvement, without officers willing to do the hard work of unlearning bias, without leaders prioritizing people over politics. He looked directly at the camera, at the live stream broadcasting to thousands. So I'm asking you, document your experiences, share your stories, vote, serve on oversight boards, hold us accountable, because this only works if we all commit to it. He held up his torn slacks, showed his bandaged knee. This is a minor injury, but it's a major symbol. I'm 72 years old. I served this state for 42 years, and this morning I was seen as a threat because of how I look, not who I am. His voice caught, just slightly, the only moment of visible emotion. If this can happen to me, with my history, my credentials, my connections, imagine what happens to young black men who can't call a governor, who don't have titles or platforms, who suffer in silence. He straightened, composed himself. They don't get press conferences, they get records, trauma, stolen dignity, and that ends today, starting with us, starting now. The applause was thunderous, sustained. Even some of the skeptical officers stood. The moment was too powerful to resist. Franklin gathered his papers, closed his briefcase, walked off stage with Mitchell and Brennan. The three of them together, the architect of change, the authority enabling it, the subject learning it. Outside, the media waited. Courthouse steps packed. The same steps where Franklin had sat that morning, where Brennan's boot had nudged him, where his papers had scattered. Full circle. Franklin insisted on speaking there, exactly there. The bloodstain was still visible on the concrete. Camera crews zoomed in on it, made it part of the visual. "Justice Oliver, will you sue the department?" "No, I'll reform it. Lawsuits punish, reform transforms." "Governor Harrison, union leaders are calling this anti-cop. Your response?" "This order is pro-accountability. If that's anti-cop, then we need to redefine what being a cop means." "Justice Oliver, why show mercy to Officer Brennan when so many are calling for his badge?" Franklin looked at Brennan, standing beside him, uniform still clean, face still wrecked. "Because I spent 30 years on the bench learning one lesson. Punishment without rehabilitation perpetuates cycles. Officer Brennan made terrible choices rooted in systemic bias. But firing him doesn't fix the system that taught him to make those choices. Changing him might." A reporter pushed forward. "What do you want people to take from this story?" Franklin paused, looked at the spot where he'd sat, where he'd been humiliated, where his dignity had been challenged. "I want people to understand this isn't about one arrest. It's about a pattern normalized for generations. A pattern that says some people are suspicious by default. Some people don't belong. Some people need to prove their humanity before receiving basic respect." He knelt, right there, on the spot where his papers had scattered, picked up a single page that had been missed. His speech notes, the original version, before it was rewritten by experience. He read aloud, "Justice is not a privilege for the credentialed. It's a birthright for the human." He stood, looked directly at the cameras. "That's what we're building, starting today." The photo went viral within minutes. Franklin kneeling on courthouse steps, bandaged knee, torn slacks, holding his speech. Brennan standing behind him, hand over heart. Mitchell in background with the executive order. The image of transformation, of accountability, of hope. 3 months later. December, cold enough to see breath. The police training facility was new, built with funding from the initiative. Modern, professional, designed for transformation. Brennan stood before a panel. Franklin sat center, Captain Torres to his left. Community representative, a pastor from the predominantly black neighborhood, to his right. Behind them, observation windows. 20 officers watching, learning. "Officer Brennan," Franklin's voice carried the same measured tone from that day. "You've completed 200 hours of training. History, psychology, law, scenario work. Tell us what you've learned." Brennan swallowed. 3 months had changed him. Not just in appearance, though he'd lost weight, looked older, but in bearing. Less certainty, more caution, more thought. 3 months ago, I saw you as a vagrant. Not as a person, not as a professional. I saw a black man sitting on steps and filled in the rest with assumptions I didn't even know I had. He showed his data. The 15 complaints. The patterns he'd refused to see. The timeline of his stops. The demographics. Undeniable. I thought I was protecting the community, but I was threatening it. I was the danger, not the people I was stopping. Franklin listened. Expression neutral. Evaluating not just words, but sincerity. Transformation isn't performative. It shows in choices, in behavior, in the moments when no one's watching. The hardest part wasn't admitting I was wrong. It was understanding how many people I harmed without ever knowing their names, how much fear I caused, how much trauma. Torres leaned forward. Officer Brennan, you've made 23 traffic stops since returning to duty. All documented. All body cam recorded. I've reviewed every one. Not a single complaint. Why? Brennan thought carefully. Because I ask myself questions now. When I feel that spike of alert, of caution, I stop and ask, am I responding to behavior or am I responding to blackness, to poverty, to appearance? And? Franklin's question was simple, direct. Usually it's the second, and I need to check myself before I check someone else. The community representative spoke, Pastor Williams. He'd attended every one of Brennan's Saturday sessions. You've sat on those courthouse steps for 13 Saturdays now, 39 more to go. What have you heard? Brennan pulled out his notebook, filled now with stories, names, experiences. I've heard from 62 people about being stopped for walking in their own neighborhoods, for sitting in their own cars, for existing while black. His voice caught. Tyler Thompson, 23 years old, college student, stopped 4 times last year. 3 times he'd done nothing. The 4th time he was on his phone. The officer thought he looked suspicious. Tyler told me. He told me he doesn't feel safe in his own city. Pastor Williams nodded. And what did you say to Tyler? I said I can't undo what happened to him, but I can make sure it doesn't happen again. And I can train other officers so they don't make the same mistakes I did. Franklin stood, held a certificate. Official seal, State of North Carolina. Officer Brad Brennan, you've completed the initial training phase, but this isn't graduation. This is day one of doing this work forever. Brennan took the certificate, shook Franklin's hand. Genuine respect between them now, earned through months of difficult work. You'll train other officers now. They'll resist. They'll mock you. They'll call you soft, compromised. Stay strong. Yes, sir. You don't owe me, officer. You owe every person you'll never arrest unjustly from now on. Every interaction where you choose humanity over assumption. That's your debt. That Saturday, Brennan sat on the courthouse steps. Session 52, the final one of the year. About 30 people gathered, regular attendees now, a community forming around the listening. Tyler showed up, nervous, angry. His mother had pushed him to come. I wasn't going to, Tyler admitted, but my mom said I should give you a chance. Brennan opened his notebook. Fresh page. I'm glad you did. Tell me your story. Tyler talked for 20 minutes. About the stops, the fear, the anger, the exhaustion of being seen as suspicious by default. Brennan wrote every word, asked questions, really listened. My dad says nothing will change, Tyler finished. That this is just performative, that in a year everything goes back to how it was. He's right to be skeptical. Brennan's honesty surprised Tyler. The system has betrayed people like you for generations. Words are cheap, but I'm going to spend every day proving through actions that this time is different. Franklin watched from his old office window, now a conference room. Helen brought him coffee. They'd formed an unexpected friendship, bonded through the shared experience. You think he really changed? Helen asked. I think he's trying. That's more than most do. You gave him a gift. No, I gave him a mirror. What he does with his reflection is up to him. Gregory Hayes exited the courthouse, saw the gathering, walked over, joined the circle. He was serving on the Civilian Oversight Board now, using his insider knowledge to push for transparency. I was there the day Justice Oliver was arrested, Gregory told the group. I didn't speak up. I was afraid. Brennan looked at him. Why? Fear of losing my job, of being labeled a troublemaker, of the cost of doing the right thing. I understand that now. Silence protects the system, not the people. Gregory nodded, sat down, shared his story. The system was changing. slowly, imperfectly, but changing. By December, the data showed it. Complaints down 41%. Use of force incidents down 38%. Community trust surveys showed improvement. Not dramatic, but measurable. Real. 49 precincts enrolled in the training. 1,200 officers certified. 6 civilian oversight boards operational. The executive order was working. At the state capitol, Mitchell signed additional funding. Expanded the program. Made it permanent. Not a pilot anymore. Policy. At Franklin's home, he wrote letters to other governors, shared the framework, the data, the lessons learned, invitations to visit, to observe, to replicate. His granddaughter colored at the kitchen table, 8 years old, brilliant, curious. "Grandpa, did you really change the police?" Franklin smiled, tired, genuine. "I helped start the change, sweetheart. Your generation will finish it." She went back to coloring, drawing a courthouse, with people on the steps, all different colors, all sitting together. Children understand justice instinctively. Adults complicate it. At the courthouse, a new bronze plaque was installed, right where Franklin had sat, where the blood stain had finally faded. In recognition of the courage to transform injustice into reform, may those who enter seek truth, not assumptions. Numbers don't lie. Lives were changing. The system was changing. One officer at a time. One interaction at a time. One choice at a time. These life stories of transformation, both Franklin's and Brennan's, became case studies. Training materials. Evidence that change is possible when accountability meets opportunity. The black stories that used to end in silence now ended in action. In reform, in hope. Not perfect, not complete, but better, measurably better. And that was something. 1 year later, December, Washington, D.C., the National Police Reform Summit. Convention center packed with 2,000 law enforcement officials from 40 states. Franklin stood at the podium, national figure now. The story had spread beyond North Carolina, beyond the viral video, into policy discussions, legislative debates, training academies. Behind him, the screen showed that morning's arrest, his papers scattering, the boot, the cuffs. No longer just a personal humiliation, now a teaching tool, a catalyst for change. 1 year ago, I was arrested for sitting. Today I'm standing here because we decided one moment of injustice could spark a movement. The statistics appeared. Impressive. Undeniable. 203 precincts adopted the program. 15,000 officers certified. Racial bias complaints down 38% nationally in participating precincts. Use of force incidents down 41%. But numbers don't tell the whole story. People do. Brennan walked onto stage. Applause rippled, some enthusiastic, some skeptical. He'd become a symbol, both inspirational and controversial. "I'm Officer Brad Brennan. I'm the man who arrested Justice Oliver. And I'm here to tell you, if I can change, anyone can." He described his journey, the resistance, the shame, the growth, the Saturday sessions, the stories he'd heard, the humanity he'd learned to see. The question isn't, are you biased? We all are. Evolution wired us for pattern recognition, for shortcuts. The question is, will you acknowledge it and do the work? Some officers applauded. Others sat silent. Change is never universal, but it's enough if it's genuine. Franklin returned to the microphone. "This isn't my program. It's ours. Every officer who chose growth over defensiveness. Every community member who shared their story. Every leader who chose accountability over comfort." He looked at Brennan, at the diverse audience, at the cameras streaming this nationally. Transformation isn't a moment, it's a commitment, and it starts with one choice: to see people, not categories, humans, not threats, individuals, not statistics. The camera panned across the audience. Sarah Bennett leading a civilian oversight board in her county. Hayes coordinating training at his precinct. Helen serving on the state advisory committee. Gregory speaking at community forums. The movement had spread. Imperfectly. Incompletely. But genuinely. Franklin stood on the courthouse steps one last time. Golden hour. Sunset painting the limestone warm orange. He sat down. Willingly. Peacefully. Where it all began. Letters in his lap. From people impacted by the reforms. From officers who'd completed the training. From community members who felt safer. From parents whose children wouldn't grow up with the same fears. One letter. You didn't know me, but your arrest changed my son's life. He's a police officer now, the kind who listens first. Thank you. A young black girl approached, 10 years old, backpack covered in pins. Are you the judge who changed the rules? Franklin smiled. I helped, but you'll finish the work when you're older. I will, she said seriously, then ran off to her mother. Franklin watched her go. Thought about his father. Birmingham. The promise made by a 5-year-old boy. The 56 years of work. The morning that tested everything. He'd lost his dignity for 90 minutes that day. But millions might gain theirs for a lifetime. That's a trade worth making. He stood. Walked up those courthouse steps one more time. The brass doors opened. He went inside. Home. This story is real. The pattern is real. And it's still happening. If you've experienced profiling, injustice, or discrimination, your story matters. Share it in the comments. Let others know they're not alone. If you've witnessed it and stayed silent, speak up. Document, record, report. Silence sustains systems. If you have power, position, voice, vote, use it for change. Real change. Not performative gestures. Actual accountability. The real-life stories that change systems are told by people like you. The touching stories that inspire reform come from lived experience. The black stories that matter most are the ones we choose to hear and act upon. Share this video. Subscribe for more stories of systemic change and transformative justice. Comment with your experiences or thoughts on police reform. Because change doesn't happen in speeches or summits. It happens in choices. Every day, one interaction at a time. What will yours be? Dignity isn't earned by credentials. It's owed to every human.